Kia ora, this is Liz. Welcome to my Bible study Dame Displays. If you haven't already watched my intro video, can I suggest you go do that now? Otherwise, grab your Bible and we will dig in. Today's verses are John chapter 1, verses 41 to 42, and I will read them for you now, if I can find them. Hang on. Alright, John 1, verses 41 and 42 says this: He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, We have found the Messiah, which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, You are Simon the son of Jonah, you shall be called Cephas, which is translated the stone. So the he at the beginning was Andrew, just so you know. So Andrew first found his own brother Simon. So what do we know of Simon? Last week we looked at Andrew, this week we're looking at Simon. Heaps, actually, much more than we knew about Andrew. Simon appears to be the oldest of the entire group. He's married. We meet his mother-in-law, and Paul alludes to his wife travelling with him at some point. So she's around somewhere in the background. He does end up being kind of the spokesman for the disciples. He's often the one to speak up when a question is asked. However, it is not Simon who ultimately is in charge in the church at Jerusalem. When controversy arises regarding circumcision for the Gentiles, Paul and Silas, after a hearty debate with the Jews over this, decide to go to Jerusalem and get a ruling from the council there. You can find all of this in Acts chapter 18. There is testimony from Peter, who points out they shouldn't be burdening new believers with a yoke that even their forefathers couldn't bear. Then Paul and Silas testify about the miracles that the Gentiles have performed without being circumcised. Ultimately, however, it is James, not the apostle. He's already been beheaded. It is James who makes the final judgment, not Simon Peter. Peter was a towering figure within the early church, but he was not the ultimate ruler of that early church. The ruler of the early church was God and Jesus, not a man. They had a council of elders to discuss and debate matters of the law, and one leading judge over that council, who was, in the era of Peter's life, James, who most scholars say was Jesus' brother. Simon is seen by many as being hot-headed and impulsive, which I'm a little sceptical of. Yes, he got out of the boat to walk to Jesus. Yes, he started to sink, but it's a bit of a leap to assume you know the motives of Simon when he does this. Maybe he was just fascinated by the prospect of walking on water, as any male would be, just saying. He is eventually nicknamed Peter by Jesus, meaning rock, for reasons I'm not going to debate here. We will get into that debate when we get there. Trust me, it's a big one. Andrew rocks up to his brother Simon with these words, We have found the Messiah. And then John pops in with another translation, which is translated the Christ. Curiosity drove Andrew and John to follow after Jesus, a willingness to follow where John the Baptist had pointed. But it didn't take long for Andrew to be fully convinced of who Jesus was, the Messiah. It's a Hebrew word. The Greek equivalent is Christ, as John tells you. They both mean the same thing, anointed. There is a "the" in the front of the word anointed that separates it from all the other anointed people throughout the history of Israel. Prophets, priests, kings all got anointed, but this one is the anointed one, God's anointed one, God's chosen one. And I'm sorry if this sounds familiar to you. If you've already watched last week's video, you'll see it's at the end of that. I'm saying the same words. The reason for that is that when I originally taught this, I did it in one block, and I felt that that was too long, so I split it up, but I wasn't careful about how I split that up. So apologies to those of you who feel like you've just hit deja vu. So Andrew barrels up to his brother with all this good news, and I can almost see him dragging Simon off to meet this amazing person. Upon arriving at Jesus' dwelling, Jesus looks at Simon, and that word look, emblepo in Greek, means to look into or upon, to consider, to see clearly, to look at with a locked-in gaze, to look at with special interest, love, or concern. So it's not just a look, it's not just a glance, it's a penetrating look that sees right through to the heart of man. I wonder how it felt to have Jesus look at you like that, to pierce through all the excuses and reasons that man can come up with and find the truth buried deep within a person's soul. I don't know anyone that looks at me like that, do you? Jesus sees Peter hiding behind Simon, but he starts his assessment with, You are Simon, son of Jonah. A simple statement of fact, which some say Jesus knew by supernatural means and others by simple means, i.e. that Andrew had introduced them. I'm not sure it matters how he knew. I think the important part of this statement is the way Jesus worded it. The son of Jonah bit tells us so much more than we realize. The name Jonah is synonymous with the name John, which is why some other translations will have Simon, son of John. Don't let it throw you off. It's still the same person we're talking about. Trust me when I tell you that Jesus mentions it for a reason, and John adds it to his gospel for a reason. If we look at the phrase son of, it can sometimes refer to an actual biological son, or it can sometimes be more metaphoric and mean that someone is like another. So someone evil can be called a son of Satan, referring to the fact that the person acts in the manner of Satan, not that they are literally born of Satan. There is a subtle message being spoken to us in Simon through the use of his father's legitimate name. Consider the prophet Jonah. Bit of an ambiguous character, possibly the forefather to the anti-hero even. A big deal in his own hometown, Jonah was not willing to perform the tasks God would have him perform. When told to go to Nineveh, he heads in the opposite direction toward Tarshish, bringing himself and the people on board the ship into immediate danger. He is thrown overboard, swallowed by a great fish, vomited back up on the shore and sent on his way to Nineveh, where he does his job, barely, and then waits for God to destroy the city. Lovely man. There are some correlations between Jonah and Simon Peter. They were both reluctant at times to do what they were told. They both went through storms. They both were rescued from a watery grave. But mainly, they both tend to be a bit wishy-washy. Jesus calls Simon the son of Jonah at the beginning of John's Gospel and actually at the end as well. After Simon's denials, when he stands on the shore, they go fishing, remember? And he stands on the shore and Jesus challenges him 3 times with the phrase, "Do you love me?" 3 times he is called Simon, son of Jonah. There is significance here for Simon, something he is to pay attention to, something very reminiscent of the original Jonah. Jesus was subtly reminding him that he needed to make up his mind, that he needed to stop dithering between 2 opinions. In the book of Acts, chapter 10, we have a story of a Roman centurion called Cornelius. He's visited by an angel who tells him to send men to Joppa and get Peter to come and explain things to him. As the group are nearing Joppa, Peter heads up to the rooftop to pray and is given a vision of a great sheet covered in unclean foods. A voice from heaven tells him to eat. He argues, of course, like a good Jewish boy should, only to be told that these things are now clean. This enabled Peter to go and spend time with Cornelius when the group arrived to fetch him. Had he not had that vision, I doubt Peter would have gone, because it seems that he was still struggling with how to behave around Gentiles when Paul came to visit. In his letter to the Galatians, Paul makes mention of a habit of Peter's that wasn't quite right. This is Galatians 2:11 and 12. But when Peter came to Antioch, I withstood him to his face, because he was to be blamed, for before certain men came from James, he would eat with the Gentiles. But when they came, he withdrew and separated himself, fearing those who were of the circumcision. It would appear then that Peter was both an actual son of Jonah and a metaphoric son of the original prophet Jonah in some ways. Jesus, of course, knew this about Simon, and yet he still saw that there was a vein of strength in him, which is why he changes his name. You are Simon, son of Jonah, you shall be called Cephas, which is to say, a stone. The Greek equivalent of that is, of course, Petros or Peter, to be anglicizing it. From here on, when John introduces Peter into his narrative, into his gospel, he calls him Simon Peter. If the same portion of narrative mentions him again, he just calls him Peter. I don't know if there were other Peters and Simons around in the day that John was making sure weren't mistakenly assumed to be who he was talking about, or whether John is trying to make a point here. If he's trying to make a point, what point do you think it could be? Is he trying to tell you that Peter wasn't quite a Peter by the stage of this gospel's writing? Or was he telling you that during those 3.5 years of Jesus' ministry, Peter was still sometimes a Simon? Could be. Could be. But what of this name change then? Why does Jesus give Simon a new name? There are several examples in the Old Testament of God changing names. Abram and Sarai to Abraham and Sarah. Jacob to Israel. Each of these name changes symbolized a change in circumstance for these people, and I would say that was true of Simon Peter too. The name Simon, or Simeon, means hearing or listening. Peter, as you know, means rock. Simon goes from being a hearer, a listener, to a solid rock on which God can build his church. That's quite a shift in circumstances. In ancient times, a slave's name would be changed by his owner. Who are Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah? These are the original names of Daniel's three mates, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. The Babylonian eunuch in charge of them gave them Babylonian names, including Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar in Babylon. It was to make them more Babylonian, of course, and to show them that they were now vassals of the king. One possible reason for changing Simon's name was to indicate that he was now a vassal of the true king. But there is also a promise in the name change. Simon dithered. On one hand, he believed Jesus was the Lord. On the other, he didn't want him to die on the cross. On one hand, he wanted to walk on water. On the other hand, he freaked out and started sinking. He was a Jonah of sorts, but God never intended for him to stay that way. God's intention was for the listening Simon to eventually have heard enough to be able to stand on a firm and solid foundation of faith in who Jesus was. One scholar wrote it like this: "Thou art now hearer, the son of Jehovah's grace. They shall be called and be a rock man." I love that. Peter was the original rock. Eat your heart out, Dwayne Johnson. It took him a while to get there, but he did get there in the end, and we should be thankful that his journey took a while. I have never been very fond of Poole. His wordy letters bamboozle me, and I always feel condemned by his rhetoric and his life. But Peter gives me hope. How many times does Peter fall over, make a mistake, say or do the wrong thing? Multiple times. And those are only the ones we know about. Peter made so many mistakes, including the biggest one of all, denying Christ. And yet, Jesus still loved him, still wanted to use him, still trusted him to do his job, to feed the sheep. Peter gives me hope that even when I stumble and fall, Jesus will still want to use me, still ask me to feed his sheep. His life, his stumbles, they make him human and a model for humility that I can relate to. God's rock that managed to hold the disciples of Christ together through the first wave of persecutions and to lay foundational truths for all of us to stand upon. That's it for this week. I hope you have a good one. Ka kite, and God bless.